Validation makes you dependent instead of disciplined, because the moment you start looking outside yourself for approval, you quietly hand over control of your effort, your consistency, and your standards to people who are not responsible for your future. When applause becomes the fuel, discipline becomes optional. And optional discipline always disappears when things get hard. You wake up motivated only when someone notices you. You work hard only when someone is watching, and you push yourself only when someone is clapping. And the problem with that kind of mindset is that life does not clap every day. Real growth happens in silence, in the dark, in moments where nobody sees the sacrifice. And if validation is what you need to move forward, you will stop the moment the noise stops. Discipline is about doing what needs to be done, even when nobody cares, even when nobody understands, even when nobody is impressed, because your commitment is not connected to attention. It is connected to purpose. The dangerous thing about seeking validation is that it slowly trains your mind to wait for permission before you act. Instead of asking yourself what needs to be done today, you start asking who will approve of it, who will like it, who will support it, and that delay costs you momentum. Discipline moves immediately. Validation waits for reassurance, and success never waits. The people who win in life are not the ones who are constantly checking the room to see who agrees with them. They are the ones who already decided what they stand for and move with or without approval. When your actions are powered by discipline, your mood does not control your effort, your emotions do not control your schedule, and other people's opinions do not control your confidence. Validation makes you weak in moments where strength is required, because the need for approval creates fear. Fear of criticism, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, and fear will always sabotage discipline. You skip workouts because someone laughed last time. You stop sharing ideas because someone doubted you. You quit early because nobody supported you fast enough. And every time that happens, discipline takes a hit. Discipline grows when you keep promises to yourself, not when others praise you. Every time you show up despite silence, despite doubt, despite lack of recognition, you strengthen a muscle that no compliment can ever replace. That muscle is self-respect, and self-respect is the foundation of discipline. People who chase validation often confuse being busy with being effective, because they want to be seen working rather than actually improving. They post progress instead of making progress. They talk about goals instead of attacking goals, and they seek motivation instead of building habits. Discipline does not announce itself. It does not need an audience. It does not need encouragement. It operates on principle. When you rely on validation, you become emotional about results. But discipline is logical. Discipline understands that consistency beats intensity, that repetition beats excitement, and that long-term commitment beats short-term praise. Another reason validation blocks discipline is because it teaches you to perform instead of prepare. You start doing things for appearance, not for mastery. You choose what looks good over what builds skill, what gets attention over what builds character, and what gets quick approval over what creates long-term results. Discipline is willing to look foolish while learning, willing to fail quietly while growing, and willing to be ignored while improving. Validation wants success without struggle, recognition without repetition, and rewards without routine, and life does not work like that. When validation becomes your motivation, quitting becomes easy, because quitting protects your ego. If you fail in silence, nobody sees it, but if you try and get judged, criticized, or ignored, it hurts, so you stop. Discipline does not quit to protect pride. It continues to protect purpose. Discipline understands that embarrassment is temporary, but regret is permanent, that pain is part of progress, and that being uncomfortable is the price of growth. Validation avoids pain. Discipline embraces it as training. Seeking validation also makes you inconsistent, because people's reactions are inconsistent. One day they support you, the next day they forget you, and if your effort depends on their reaction, your performance will rise and fall with their attention. Discipline is stable because it is internal. It does not change with compliments or criticism. It shows up on good days and bad days, confident days and doubtful days, loud days and silent days. Discipline does not need motivation because it has identity. You do what you do because of who you are becoming, not because of what people think. The truth is, nobody owes you belief. Nobody owes you encouragement. Nobody owes you understanding. And waiting for validation is a form of procrastination disguised as humility. Discipline accepts responsibility without guarantees. It says, I will work whether you clap or not. I will improve whether you notice or not. I will stay committed whether you believe or not. That mindset separates leaders from followers, builders from dreamers, and achievers from talkers. Every great transformation starts when a person stops asking for approval and starts demanding excellence from themselves. Discipline grows when you hold yourself accountable in private, when you do the hard thing, even when the easy thing would get more approval, and when you choose progress over popularity. Validation makes you dependent on others, but discipline makes you reliable to yourself. And the moment you become reliable to yourself, your standards rise, your habits sharpen, and your life begins to move in a direction that no opinion can stop. You delay action because you fear people's opinions, and that fear quietly steals more opportunities than failure ever could. The moment you start worrying about what others might say, think, or assume, your mind shifts from execution to imagination, and imagination fueled by fear always creates worst case scenarios. You picture judgment before effort, criticism before results, and rejection before progress. And that mental noise slows you down. Instead of moving forward, you pause. Instead of starting, you hesitate. Instead of learning through action, you stay stuck planning, waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect confidence, or the perfect approval that never arrives. Success rewards speed and courage, not permission and comfort. Fear of opinions creates a habit of delay because it makes every decision feel heavier than it really is. Simple steps turn into emotional battles. Posting content, starting a business, changing routines, speaking up, or trying something new begins to feel like standing on a stage in front of critics rather than taking a small step toward growth. You start overthinking instead of doing. You ask yourself unnecessary questions like, what if they laugh? What if they don't support me? What if I fail publicly? And those questions drain energy that should be spent on action. Action builds clarity, but fear demands certainty before movement, and certainty only comes after movement. When you fear people's opinions, you give them authority over your timing. You don't start when you're ready. You start when you feel safe, and safety is the enemy of growth. Every season you wait for approval is a season you could have been improving. While you're delaying, someone with less talent but more courage is moving ahead. While you're waiting to be understood, someone else is learning by doing. Fear does not stop time. It only stops you. And life does not slow down to match hesitation. This fear often disguises itself as preparation. You tell yourself you're not ready yet. You need more information, more confidence, more resources. But deep down, it's not readiness you're waiting for. It's reassurance. You want confirmation that people will accept your effort before you invest fully in it. The problem is that opinions change, attention fades, and approval is unpredictable. If you wait for the crowd to agree with you, you will always be late to your own destiny. Action does not require full confidence. It creates confidence through experience. Fear of opinions also makes you play small because you choose what feels acceptable instead of what feels aligned. You lower your standards to avoid criticism. You soften your voice to avoid conflict. You delay bold moves to avoid standing out. Over time, this creates frustration because deep down, you know you're capable of more, but fear keeps you operating below your potential. Delayed action slowly turns into self-doubt, not because you can't do it, but because you keep proving to yourself that fear has more control than your goals. Another dangerous effect of fearing opinions is that it trains you to value comfort over progress. You avoid actions that could lead to growth because growth attracts attention, and attention invites judgment. You stay in familiar routines because they don't challenge how others see you. You repeat patterns that feel safe even when they don't move you forward. Progress requires visibility, risk, and vulnerability. And fear of opinions convinces you that being unseen is safer than being successful. But invisibility does not protect you from regret. It only delays fulfillment. When you delay action due to fear, discipline weakens and excuses grow stronger. You begin justifying inactivity with logic that sounds reasonable but leads nowhere. You say you'll start tomorrow, next week, next month, when things calm down, when people understand you better. Fear loves timelines that never arrive. Action forces fear to shrink, but delay gives it space to grow. The longer you wait, the louder opinions seem, even when no one is actually paying attention. Most people are too busy with their own lives to judge you as much as you think, but fear convinces you otherwise. Fear of opinions also disconnects you from learning. Mistakes are powerful teachers, but only if you allow yourself to make them. When you delay action, you delay feedback, you delay growth, you delay skill development, you delay resilience. Every attempt teaches you something, but fear keeps you stuck in theory. You can read, watch, and plan forever, but without action, nothing changes. People who succeed are not fearless. They are just willing to act while fear is present. The truth is, opinions have no real power unless you pause for them. They cannot stop your progress unless you let them dictate your pace. Criticism cannot harm you unless you allow it to shape your decisions. Judgment cannot define you unless you surrender your self-belief. Action exposes fear as exaggerated, temporary, and survivable. Every step forward weakens the grip of imagined opinions and strengthens trust in yourself. Delayed action costs more than embarrassment ever will. It costs time, momentum, confidence, and opportunity. Years pass quickly when you keep waiting for the right moment to begin. Fear promises protection but delivers regret. Action demands courage but rewards clarity. The moment you choose to move despite the fear of opinions, you reclaim control over your life, your growth, and your direction, and momentum begins to replace hesitation. Experience replaces doubt, and self-trust replaces the need to be accepted. Approval addiction kills originality and courage because the moment you start measuring your actions, your words, and your ideas against what others will accept, you stop being yourself. You begin to conform, to imitate, to water down your uniqueness just to fit in, just to be liked, just to avoid criticism. And the problem with that is that greatness does not emerge from imitation. Greatness emerges from authenticity, from risk, from standing alone when nobody else will, from saying what everyone else is afraid to say, and from taking actions that feel uncomfortable but necessary. When you are addicted to approval, every step you take is calculated to satisfy someone else's expectations rather than express your own vision. Your creativity diminishes, your innovation stalls, and your courage shrinks because both originality and courage require a willingness to be judged and misunderstood. When you chase approval, you live in the shadow of other people's opinions. You compare yourself constantly, asking whether your ideas are good enough or popular enough, and that comparison kills originality. You stop thinking independently, you stop experimenting, you stop trying new approaches because you fear they might be rejected or ridiculed. Approval addiction transforms curiosity and bold thinking into hesitation and repetition. You repeat what has already worked for others instead of discovering what could work for you. You adopt safe methods instead of creating new methods. You limit yourself because you are afraid of stepping outside the comfort zone of others' acceptance. And every time you play it safe, your potential shrinks quietly behind the curtain of someone else's opinion. Courage is also destroyed by approval addiction because courage requires the willingness to fail, to stand apart, and to continue despite criticism. When approval drives your behavior, fear drives your choices. You avoid difficult conversations. You avoid bold moves. You avoid opportunities where you might be wrong or misjudged. And as a result, you never build the muscle of resilience that comes from facing adversity head on. Courage is not about the absence of fear. It is about action despite fear. And when your actions are designed to gain approval, fear is always in the driver's seat. You no longer act out of principle, purpose, or belief. You act out of the desire to be liked, which is a weaker and less sustainable form of motivation. Over time, this leads to mediocrity disguised as safety because you are constantly avoiding risk instead of embracing it. Approval addiction also sabotages originality because it trains your mind to look for external validation before expression. You draft ideas but hesitate to share them until you think someone will approve. You rehearse your actions until they feel perfect to someone else. You edit yourself constantly, not for clarity or truth, but for acceptance. Every time you do this, originality is eroded. Originality requires experimentation, mistakes, iteration, and imperfect attempts. And approval addiction creates the illusion that only polished, approved ideas have value. You trade boldness for comfort, and the world rarely rewards comfort in the way it rewards innovation. When you are addicted to approval, you also create a pattern of dependency. Your self-esteem rises and falls with external praise. Your confidence is contingent on applause, likes, recognition, and acceptance. And when the applause fades or never comes, your motivation falters. Courage requires internal fuel, belief in yourself, commitment to your vision, and faith in your ability to handle consequences. But approval addiction replaces that internal fuel with a fragile dependence on others. You become reactive rather than proactive, responsive rather than creative, and every bold action is filtered through the lens of potential judgment rather than necessity or principle. The addiction to approval creates a false sense of safety. You think that by being liked, by fitting in, or by meeting expectations, you are protected from failure or rejection. But life does not reward safety, it rewards impact. And impact requires standing out, being bold, and risking judgment. Every time you shrink to gain approval, you reduce your potential impact. And every time you allow fear of disapproval to shape your decisions, you miss the chance to discover what only you could have created. Originality is lost when your goal becomes acceptance instead of influence, expression, and contribution. Approval addiction also limits your leadership. Leaders are often the ones who face criticism first, who speak up when others stay silent, and who make decisions that may be unpopular but necessary. If you are constantly seeking approval, you are not leading, you are following. You are validating others instead of asserting your own vision. Courage requires the ability to do what is right regardless of popularity, and originality requires the confidence to explore paths others have not taken. Both are compromised when approval dictates your choices, because approval is temporary, subjective, and unpredictable. Another problem is that approval addiction creates a fear of authenticity. You begin to hide parts of yourself, your thoughts, and your values to avoid judgment. You compromise your identity in order to gain temporary acceptance. This compromises your creativity, limits your self-expression, and weakens your ability to innovate. Originality thrives in authenticity, and courage thrives in conviction, but approval addiction forces you to conform, to mimic, and to follow the crowd. You are no longer responding to opportunity with your own ideas. You are responding to what you think others will accept. Over time, this creates internal conflict, frustration, and the sense that you are living a life that is not fully yours. The solution lies in shifting your motivation from approval to purpose. When your actions are driven by a sense of mission rather than applause, courage strengthens and originality flourishes. You stop measuring every decision by the reactions of others and start measuring it by the alignment with your goals, your values, and your potential. You accept that failure, judgment, and misunderstanding are part of the journey, and you develop resilience, boldness, and creativity because you are no longer constrained by the fear of disapproval. Originality and courage thrive in discomfort, and the moment you seek approval less and purpose more, you unlock the freedom to create, innovate, and act with confidence. You lose focus when you seek applause instead of results, because your attention constantly shifts from what truly matters to what looks good to others. The moment your motivation depends on external recognition, every decision is filtered through the lens of approval rather than effectiveness, and effectiveness requires clarity, consistency, and relentless focus. When you chase applause, you prioritize optics over outcomes. You spend energy crafting appearances, managing impressions, and curating how people see you instead of building skills, executing plans, and creating measurable progress. Focus becomes a casualty because your mind is split between the work that matters and the validation you crave, and divided attention is never enough to produce extraordinary results. Seeking applause over results trains your brain to respond to the wrong signals. Instead of responding to indicators of growth, improvement, and performance, you respond to likes, comments, praise, and nods of approval. Your energy rises and falls based on reactions that are inconsistent, fleeting, and outside your control. Real results are built in silence, through repetition, through effort that goes unnoticed for long stretches, but applause is inconsistent. The person who depends on it will naturally experience emotional ups and downs that distract from steady progress. You start measuring success by reaction rather than by achievement, and reaction is often unrelated to actual impact. Applause can be delayed, it can be absent, it can be misunderstood, and when your focus depends on it, your trajectory suffers. This constant distraction also reduces your ability to plan strategically. When your decisions are motivated by how others will perceive them, your priorities become skewed. You chase what's popular, what's trendy, or what will earn immediate recognition instead of what builds long-term value. You act reactively rather than proactively. Opportunities that require patience, persistence, or quiet effort are neglected because they don't promise instant applause. Focus demands that you direct your energy toward actions with the greatest payoff, even if they are unglamorous, uncomfortable, or invisible, and seeking approval consistently pulls you away from these high-value actions. Seeking applause also encourages multitasking instead of mastery. When you are concerned with what others think, you spread your energy across many projects, ideas, and activities that might get attention, rather than dedicating yourself to the depth and quality required to excel. Your attention is divided between the work itself and the audience's perception of the work. Multitasking reduces efficiency, weakens skill development, and slows the progress that comes from consistent, deliberate practice. Discipline and focus thrive when your attention is undistracted, when your effort is singular, and when your measure of success is tied to results rather than reactions. Another consequence of seeking applause is that it fosters impatience. You want recognition now, you want validation now, and when it doesn't come, you doubt yourself, second guess your methods, and sometimes abandon work prematurely. Real results often require sustained effort over months or years before they are recognized. But if your motivation is applause driven, you will give up before the payoff arrives. Focus requires patience. trust in process, and the ability to operate when progress is invisible. Seeking external approval undermines these qualities because you constantly measure effort against reception rather than impact. Seeking applause also interferes with decision making. When you prioritize what will be praised over what is effective, you compromise clarity. You hesitate to take bold steps, implement changes, or challenge norms because you fear criticism. You avoid necessary risks that could lead to breakthroughs because you are concerned with perception. Every time you choose comfort or acceptance over decisive action, your focus diminishes. Results require decisive movement, calculated risk, and unwavering commitment, but applause encourages avoidance, hesitation, and compromise. When your focus is scattered by the need for validation, you also reduce your resilience. Challenges, setbacks, and criticism are inevitable when pursuing meaningful goals. But if your energy is tied to applause, negative reactions or silence can throw you off course. You lose motivation, self-confidence, and clarity when external feedback fluctuates. Discipline, concentration, and endurance suffer because your internal drive is weak compared to your external dependency. Results are built on resilience, the ability to continue through difficulty, but applause seekers are easily distracted, discouraged, and derailed. Additionally, seeking applause can distort your measurement of progress. You may celebrate minor recognition as a sign of achievement and ignore whether real results have been produced. Or you may chase attention for the sake of feeling productive without actually moving closer to your goals. Focus requires honest assessment, reflection, and adjustment based on objective metrics. But applause can mislead you. You start valuing popularity over performance, appearance over impact, and transient approval over lasting change. This misalignment further erodes focus, efficiency, and momentum. The habit of seeking applause also creates external dependency for motivation. Instead of being driven by purpose, internal standards, or commitment to excellence, your actions are fueled by fleeting affirmation. When affirmation is delayed or absent, your drive weakens, leading to distraction, procrastination, and inconsistency. Results require consistent effort, internal discipline, and accountability to yourself, not to the crowd. Dependence on applause makes your energy reactive, inconsistent, and ultimately ineffective. To maintain focus, you must detach from external validation and anchor yourself in outcomes, principles, and long-term vision. Attention must be directed to tasks that compound, actions that produce measurable impact, and habits that strengthen skill and character. Applause may feel rewarding, but it is temporary and unreliable. Focus requires investing in invisible work, making sacrifices, and staying committed when no one is watching. The individual who prioritizes results over applause gains clarity, efficiency, and momentum that the approval seeker will never achieve. Finally, seeking applause over results reduces the quality of your learning. You may avoid experimenting or innovating because failure could be noticed. You may stick to familiar methods that are safe and likable rather than testing new approaches that are effective. Growth comes from risk, reflection, and iteration, but applause seekers prioritize perception over learning. Every distraction caused by approval seeking is a lost opportunity to improve, refine, and move closer to mastery. And over time, this behavior fundamentally limits potential, achievement, and the ability to produce meaningful results. Growth requires being misunderstood and uncomfortable, because the moment you step into something greater than your current life, you immediately step outside the comfort zone of familiarity, acceptance, and understanding. Most people want growth without the friction. They want progress without conflict, and they want success without criticism. But life does not operate that way. The more you grow, the more you challenge existing perceptions, the more you stretch beyond old habits, and the more you act in ways that others cannot immediately comprehend. Being misunderstood is not a reflection of failure. It is often a sign that you are doing something different, something necessary, and something that requires courage. Every pioneer, innovator, and leader in history was initially misunderstood because they were moving ahead of the current mindset, ahead of popular opinion, and ahead of what others were willing to do. Discomfort, similarly, is a signal that you are expanding your capacity, stepping into new skills and pushing limits, and those who avoid discomfort remain stagnant, repeating patterns that offer temporary satisfaction but no long-term transformation. When you grow, people who are comfortable with the familiar will not always understand your actions. Your ambition, your focus, and your vision may confuse or intimidate those those who have never committed to similar levels of effort. Friends, family, and colleagues may question your choices, doubt your timing, and challenge your methods, and this is natural. The problem arises when you allow their misunderstanding to influence your decisions or slow your progress. The fear of being judged or misinterpreted often causes hesitation, procrastination, and compromise, which limits potential. To grow, you must embrace the reality that not everyone will see the journey as clearly as you do, that misunderstanding is a byproduct of movement, and that discomfort is a companion on the path to mastery. Discomfort forces adaptation, resilience, and learning. When you are uncomfortable, your body and mind are signaling that you are stretching, that you are entering unfamiliar territory, and that growth is occurring. Discomfort might come as physical strain when you push your limits, mental strain when you challenge old beliefs, or emotional strain when you face criticism or isolation, and each form of strain has value. Resistance is a teacher, and those who lean into it develop strength, perspective, and wisdom. Avoiding discomfort delays growth because it keeps you confined to what is easy, predictable, and socially acceptable. And while ease may feel safe, it rarely produces excellence, influence, or fulfillment. Being misunderstood also protects your originality. When everyone understands, everyone agrees, or everyone validates, it is often because the path is conventional, safe, and widely accepted. Original ideas, bold visions, and radical approaches are often met with confusion, skepticism, or criticism because they are not yet mainstream. If you desire true growth, you must become comfortable with the idea that your direction may not be immediately clear to others. Misunderstanding does not mean you are wrong. It often means that you are ahead of the curve, thinking differently, and pioneering something valuable. Allowing the fear of misunderstanding to dictate your choices will keep you tethered to mediocrity, limiting creativity and innovation. Discomfort also builds discipline. When you grow, challenges will emerge. Early mornings, long hours, rigorous learning, rejection, and sacrifice. And all of these experiences are uncomfortable. Discipline is strengthened in these moments because it requires you to continue despite pain, fatigue, and uncertainty. The person who grows consistently learns to embrace discomfort as a natural part of the process rather than an obstacle to avoid. They develop the mental toughness to withstand criticism, the patience to endure slow progress, and the resilience to recover from setbacks. Avoiding discomfort, on the other hand, produces inconsistency, fragility, and stagnation. Another aspect of growth is emotional discomfort. When you change, relationships can shift. People may feel threatened, envious, or insecure, and they may attempt to pull you back into old patterns. You may experience loneliness, misunderstanding, or isolation, and this emotional strain is part of the cost of leveling up. Growth requires courage to withstand these social pressures, clarity to remain aligned with your purpose, and confidence to continue even when support is absent. Those who cannot tolerate being misunderstood or uncomfortable often revert to familiar surroundings, sacrificing potential for acceptance. Discomfort also accelerates learning. When you are pushed outside your comfort zone, you are forced to acquire new skills, adapt to new situations, and develop creative solutions to unexpected problems. Comfort produces repetition, familiarity, and predictability, which are valuable to a degree, but do not expand capability. Growth requires stretching your abilities, exploring new ideas, and confronting challenges that feel intimidating or unfamiliar. And this is inherently uncomfortable. Mastery is born in these spaces where mistakes are made, lessons are learned, and perseverance is required. Being misunderstood and uncomfortable also strengthens character. It teaches humility, patience, and empathy because you realize that everyone does not see the world the way you do, and everyone does not operate with the same level of commitment or vision. You learn to rely on internal standards, internal validation, and internal motivation rather than seeking approval from external sources. This internal foundation is what sustains growth when applause fades, criticism comes, and challenges persist. Character forged in discomfort becomes unshakable because it is rooted in personal integrity, not in the fleeting acceptance of others. Growth demands embracing the unknown. Being misunderstood and uncomfortable is a signal that you are exploring territory that others have not navigated. It requires a mindset that values progress over popularity, purpose over praise, and potential over opinion. The path will be challenging, filled with obstacles that test resolve, and moments where doubt and fear seem overwhelming. But these moments are critical markers of expansion. Growth occurs when you continue forward despite these signals, interpreting misunderstanding as validation that you are breaking new ground in discomfort, as evidence that you are stretching your capacity. Finally, the journey of growth requires patience. Misunderstanding can persist for years before recognition arrives. Discomfort can feel relentless before results manifest. Those who grow understand that immediate comprehension by others is unnecessary, that approval is optional, and that lasting impact is built through consistent effort in the face of resistance. The more you embrace being misunderstood and uncomfortable, the more resilient, focused, and capable you become. And this combination is what propels extraordinary achievement, innovation, and fulfillment. Success begins when self-belief replaces external praise, because the moment you stop seeking approval and start trusting yourself, you reclaim the energy, focus, and clarity needed to take bold action. External praise is fleeting. It depends on circumstances, opinions, and moods of others that you cannot control. If your confidence is tied to applause, every delay, criticism, or silence will derail your progress. Self-belief, on the other hand, is internal, steady, and constant. It allows you to move forward regardless of recognition, judgment, or misunderstanding. When you believe in your capabilities, your vision, and your purpose, you act decisively, take risks, and persist through setbacks, because your motivation comes from within rather than from the approval of others. This internal foundation is what separates those who achieve their goals from those who remain dependent on external validation for confidence and momentum. Self-belief fuels consistency because it eliminates the need for external reinforcement to keep going. When you rely on applause, your energy spikes and dips based on how people react. But self-belief maintains a steady drive. You show up every day, push through fatigue, and continue improving even when no one notices. Progress requires repetition, patience, and persistence. And these qualities are strengthened when self-belief guides your actions. You develop discipline because your actions are tied to standards you hold for yourself rather than fluctuating recognition. This shift is crucial because discipline is the engine that transforms potential into achievement. And without self-belief, discipline is fragile and inconsistent. Believing in yourself also enhances resilience. Life is full of challenges, setbacks, and criticism. And if your confidence is dependent on external praise, these obstacles can easily derail you. Self-belief allows you to endure failure, learn from mistakes, and maintain focus on long-term goals. You no longer need constant reassurance from others because your confidence comes from understanding your capabilities and your commitment to your purpose. Resilience is strengthened when self-belief anchors your identity, and this resilience allows you to navigate difficult situations with clarity and determination rather than being swayed by external judgment or temporary applause. Self-belief transforms your relationship with risk and opportunity. When you trust yourself, you are more willing to take calculated risks, explore unfamiliar territory, and innovate. External praise often encourages caution because people fear criticism or disapproval, but self-belief empowers bold action. You become proactive rather than reactive, creating opportunities instead of waiting for validation or permission. Risk becomes a tool for growth rather than a source of fear, and innovation becomes possible because you are no longer constrained by the opinions of others. Courage and creativity thrive when internal confidence replaces the need for external approval, and this combination is essential for achieving extraordinary results. Self-belief also strengthens your decision-making. When you depend on praise, decisions are often influenced by what others might think rather than what is strategically best. You second-guess yourself, delay action, or compromise your vision to appease external expectations. When self-belief replaces external praise, your decisions are guided by purpose, knowledge, and internal standards. You act decisively, follow through on commitments, and adjust based on outcomes rather than opinions. This clarity allows you to move faster, execute more effectively, and achieve results that applause alone cannot generate. Another critical aspect of self-belief is that it fosters authenticity. When you are no longer driven by the desire for recognition, you can act in alignment with your true values, vision, and goals. Authenticity attracts the right opportunities, people, and connections because you are no longer performing for approval, but creating impact from a place of genuine intent. People are drawn to those who are confident and consistent, not those who constantly seek affirmation. Self-belief liberates you from the pressure to conform, allowing originality, creativity, and leadership to flourish. Your actions are guided by conviction rather than convenience, and this integrity is a powerful driver of long-term success. Self-belief also allows for sustainable motivation. External praise is temporary and unreliable, which makes it an unstable source of motivation. When you believe in yourself, your motivation is anchored internally, which allows you to maintain effort even when progress is slow, recognition is absent, or obstacles appear. Internal motivation is more resilient because it is linked to purpose and self-respect rather than transient external reactions. This internal drive ensures that you continue to work diligently, develop skills, and pursue goals relentlessly, which is essential for achieving meaningful and lasting success. Moreover, self-belief encourages a growth mindset. When you trust your ability to learn, adapt, and improve, challenges become opportunities rather than threats. External praise often focuses on outcomes rather than growth, making failure feel like rejection. But self-belief allows you to view setbacks as essential feedback and learning experiences. You develop the courage to experiment, the patience to iterate, and the persistence to continue despite difficulty. Growth is accelerated when your confidence is rooted in your potential rather than in others' perceptions of your performance. Self-belief also enhances your influence and leadership. People follow those who are confident and self-assured because they inspire trust and clarity. When you act from self-belief rather than seeking approval, your decisions carry weight, your vision becomes compelling, and your actions influence others naturally. Leadership requires certainty, conviction, and the ability to take initiative, all of which are strengthened by internal confidence. Approval dependence diminishes leadership because it makes you reactive and indecisive. But self-belief allows you to lead with clarity, courage, and impact. Finally, success begins when self-belief replaces external praise because self-belief allows you to reclaim control over your actions, energy, and focus. It frees you from the distraction of trying to satisfy everyone else and anchors your identity in your own standards and purpose. With self-belief, you act consistently, persist through challenges, take bold risks, make clear decisions, remain authentic, stay motivated, embrace growth, and lead effectively. Success is no longer dependent on fleeting reactions or approval from others. It becomes the natural outcome of disciplined effort, courageous action, and unwavering trust in your own capabilities.